Hey, it's Matt from Black Hole Woodworking. Welcome back. Today I'm making a ladle. I got this idea from Andrew McCarn from the Carolina Grain Company. He has a video on that and it's really good. You should go watch that. I'll put the link in the description. This is really my take on it. It's a concept for me, or a proof of concept, so I'm using pine 2x4s just to see if I can do it. And the big reason I'm doing that is because my lathe is not nearly as big as the lathe that Andrew has. So this is my attempt at trying to make a 15-inch, or mine ended up being 14.5 inches long, on a lathe that has nowhere near the capacity to do that like Andrew's lathe has, because he can move his motor off the end of the bed to handle this long handle that's going to stick out. So I'm going to try and piece mine together. Right now you're watching me rough down the top part of the ladle that has just a tiny bit of the handle on it, and that's because that's the max that I can put on my lathe to be able to scoop out the bowl that I need to get to. This will make sense as the video goes on. So until now you've seen me try to round this out with a skew chisel, being an off-center turning that didn't quite work out as well as I had hoped, so I switched to a roughing gouge. That's working out well. Right now I'm trying to use the corners to get close enough to that bowl as I can so that there's less sanding later. So I've never made one of these before. I don't know if I've said that yet, which is why I'm going quite a bit slower. I'm trying to work my way through the process here. There's definitely a few steps I've got to do in order for this to happen. Moving on to round, this is the tricky part. I stuck a drill bit on the end of that particular piece where the tailstock was in, and then I pushed it into the spring-loaded live center that I have. That worked remarkably well. As long as I was drilling in, then the piece would connect with the live center and the drill would activate and it would cut into the wood. And it remarkably stayed extremely straight the whole time. Moving on to the rest of the handle now. Again, I went to the rough and gouge just to get it down to mostly round. And it is so blazing cold in the shop. It's actually -40 outside. And that's the same in Fahrenheit as it is in Celsius, for those who are wondering. So hence I'm not touching the metal there. And this has been mighty cold on the hands so far, but you know, some quick times of warming them up has done wonders. Now that I'm mostly round, I'm going to use a parting tool and my calipers to kind of rough out the measurement that I think is close to where I need to be in order to connect the top part of the ladle to the rest of this handle. Back to the skew where I can now rough this down again. I can go a lot quicker here as I can take heavier cuts and there's nothing delicate about this. Clearly I pushed too hard as my lathe stopped. Usually that's because the resonance gets hit. Whatever that frequency is the same frequency that makes my lathe stop. Happens once in a while, kind of weird. If anyone knows how to make that stop, I'd love to know. Moving on to my favorite kind of cut, which is a peeling cut. It allows me to remove the rest of the bulk here much more quickly. A few more cuts here and this thing will be down to round. Alright, back to the tricky bits. I've got to measure how deep that hole is and transfer that mark onto this piece so I can make a kind of a dowel? Insert? Tenon? Not even sure what to call it. So I'm back to the caliper and my parting tool. And my parting tool is getting super short, so had to switch over, thankfully, back to the skew once I had enough room and do some more peeling cuts. it's a much faster way for me to get this down to size, and fairly accurately too. I need to make sure this cut is super straight, perpendicular, so that when it meets the handle here, that they connect very, very tightly. Alright, now I've got them both together on the lathe. Of course, my brain is saying, that's a thin piece of wood in the middle. Is this going to work? I have no idea. So I'm going slow, and every time it starts jittering, so do my knees. And at some point here, I'm going to just kind of give up on the jittering and hold the thing with my hand as I turn. Works out quite well, actually, because I've taken out anything that could be sliverish, even though this is pine. There's really a very smooth way to hold it, and being super cold outside, it was a great way to warm my hands. My goal here is to make the pieces join seamlessly at the same diameter. And I did notice something as I was turning this thing. I would be having a perfectly smooth cut, and suddenly it would start jittering again. And I found that if you rotate the bottom half of the handle and the top part of the handle, they do not line up anymore. So they have a specific orientation. And maybe once I got this far, I should have taped them together so I could continue on the bottom part of the handle, but I never did. Anyway, on to disguising them now. I don't want that to be an obvious joint, so I'm using the skew and just kind of poking in there a little bit, with the full intent of burning the ever-living snot out of those 3 lines with a used guitar string. And that too took a bunch of time, because if the piece turned, the head turned at different speed than the tail did, they wouldn't line up anymore. And I had to take a lot of time to burn this, because I didn't want to pull too hard. Again, that's a thin piece in the middle. Alright, time to add some finishing to the part of the handle that I can finish. And this is shellac. I am just doing a shellac and wax finish for this one, being a prototype, and who knows how far I'll get with that top part of the ladle anyway, so we'll do our best. For the wax, I've got a Forbidden Reese's Pieces. I ended up melting a bunch of wax into a muffin tin, which is a great way to collect all the wax from my wife's favorite candles. Alright, now that the finishing is done there, let's see what we've got. We can pop that guy out, and fits in quite snugly. I'm super happy about that. This is a screw chuck that I made, and obviously I've disconnected the lower portion of the handle, and now you can see why I can't go any longer on that handle. Anymore, it's going to hit the bed. So what I'm doing here is making a tenon that I can grab with the 4-jaw chuck so I can hollow out the bowl. But while I'm on this side, I'm going to round as much of the bottom as I can. One of the rules I make for myself in this situation is that nothing goes past the tool rest. I would not like to get smacked by that handle. So definitely something I keep in mind the whole time as I'm doing this is my hands don't go anywhere beyond that. Just got to make that tenon a little bit deeper. It's still going to end up being a little too shallow, but it worked. Here's another view from this angle. Now to hollow it out, I've switched to a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. I'm going to speed this part up a little bit. I had to go a little bit slower hollowing this out. As I mentioned, the tenon was a little bit on the short side, but it still worked out. It just meant I had to go a bit slower, so I sped the video up so you didn't have to experience it the same way I did. This is one of those last pass kind of moves where it's getting pretty thin on the rim, kind of where I wanted it, and I'm just trying to clean it up before I get into sanding. This is how I sanded the outside. We're not going to watch a lot of this. I just wanted to show you that I basically spent some time here shaping it with a sander. I made sure to apply the shellac on the rest of this ladle, the handle and the head. I think it's time to make sure that I check out its little party trick one more time. Now it's time for glue. Like a glove. Even up close, I cannot tell where that joint is. It is quite good, actually. I was very happy with how that came out. Thanks for watching. If I've earned your subscription, consider subscribing. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and share it. And I'll see you guys next time.